We start off all our debates because fair and honest is our motto. And by the way, while I'm shuffling the cards here, let me introduce the president of the City Club, Jay Doherty, and the chairman of the board, Tom Roser. And for one of the few times, Tom Roser philosophically today is in the majority. So just take any card. There you go. Now, if you draw number 7, you have to draw again. Here you go, Jim. Draw any card you like. Okay, who's number 1?
I am.
There you go. I should make that announcement. We invited all 7 candidates. Mr. McKenna chose not to attend. So we'll go with 6, and that's the way it's going to be. So, without any more from me, God only knows, you could speak right from there, Bob. Starting off will be Bob Schillerstrom. Everyone gets a round of applause, whether you like him or not. And, Bob, the question is the state of my campaign as it is today.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you all for coming out. Our campaign is growing day by day. As you know, it's kind of an unusual election season, with the primary pushed up to February 2nd and early voting starting today. So our focus has been on a January sprint. We've all been bunched together for the last couple of months as we've traveled around the state. I've been all over the state talking to the people of Illinois, and our message has resonated from the southern part of the state to the northern part of the state. And simply put, our message is that Illinois is broken. It's not working for the people, whether it's you, business people, families, students. It's just broken. What we need to have is a fresh approach and a difference than the way it's being done in Springfield now. I bring that fresh approach. I've never run for statewide office. I am not part of state government. I'm not part of the problem. The second thing that distinguishes me is that I'm the only one with executive experience, having run a county that's larger than 6 states for the last 11 years in a very fiscally conservative way, lowering property taxes 8 out of the last 11 years. We've also created a job center where we've brought 60,000 jobs. I will bring that approach to Springfield. The other distinguishing factor about me is I am the moderate in this race. I am the person that will be most electable in the general election. So our campaign continues to grow. We'd love to have you involved, and we look forward to being the next governor of Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 2.
Get us in order here, Paul.
I really shuffled the cards well. Go right ahead.
Good morning, and thanks for coming out. I'm a longtime loyal member of the City Club of Chicago. My campaign is going very well because it's founded upon leadership, experience, and ethical judgment. I have a unique blend of experience to balance our state's budget without a tax increase, to create jobs, and to clean up Springfield. The reason that Governor Jim Edgar endorsed me is because he said I was instrumental in forcing this state to live within its means when I was his chief of staff. Governor is not an entry-level position. The Sun-Times said in its very strong endorsement of me last Friday, quote, "Grand plans are a dime a dozen. Every candidate has one. Far more valuable is the political skill to carry out that plan, and here Dillard stands apart." So why is my campaign going well? Well, I've got the best plan to make Illinois a destination economy. It calls for Medicaid and pension reforms and real spending cuts. We'll make Illinois work again. I also will end corruption. I've already pledged to shut down my campaign fund when I am sworn into office, and I'll devote all my time to governing, not fundraising. That's what's needed to end the era of embarrassment in Springfield. So my message has never changed since July 8th when I announced real experience, real jobs, real reforms, and ethical judgment. That's the kind of commitment I make to the people of the state of Illinois, and that's why my campaign is going very well. Thank you.
Very good. Number 3.
I'm number 6.
Oh.
It's me, Paul.
Oh, okay. Given the tension here, I would think the U.S. Attorney would be coming down. Okay, go right ahead.
Thank you, Paul. Tension. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you. And thanks for the opportunity to visit and discuss what's going on in the campaigns. I think everyone's going to tell you their campaign's going very well. and ours is as well. We've had an opportunity to travel throughout this state, realize what the challenges are facing Illinois. There's a lot of people out there that are worried about whether or not they're going to have a job tomorrow and what we're going to do about it. But they also realize there's a lot of great opportunities in this state. There's probably no state riper for opportunity than Illinois. And as we travel around this state, talking about what's important to people, a clean break from the politicians of the past, someone who can stand above ethical reproach, someone who focuses on term limits, contribution limits, and giving the government back to the people is what's resonated. We also need a candidate that can represent the entire interest of the state of Illinois. I know I'm from downstate, but I've also had a huge impact on trying to lead issues like business development, bringing Walmart and Myers to the city of Chicago, healthcare reform so that health facilities can invest in their communities, capital investment and healthcare investment. And I've also led on the need for jobs, cutting taxes, cutting spending, balancing our budget, forming workers' compensation, and making Illinois the land of opportunity. That's what's resonated so well as we look for a leader in this state who can lead on the interests that are important to the people of Illinois, not the self-serving politicians who have political insider connections. So I look forward to visiting with you here, and I look forward to your questions. I want to thank you for your ability to be here and look forward to your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Number 4.
Hi, my name is Dan Proft. I'm a conservative Republican candidate for governor. The campaign is going well, but it's a different metric by which I use to measure our campaign because, see, I understand that this race is about policy choices, not about biographies or political personalities. Because for the last 25 years, if we're being real honest with ourselves, it has been Republicans and Democrats in Springfield who have come together to make horrific public policy choices. So the experience that Senator Dillard talks about poses a question, which is, how's that working out for us? And I don't think it's working out particularly well. In this race, I've done what I've done for the last 15 years, which is stand up when I should stand up. Because, again, it's about policy outcomes. So I stood with families who have children with disabilities against SEIU when SEIU tried to unionize the home health care worker program in this state, and we pushed them back. Those families voted overwhelmingly 2-1 not to allow SEIU to intervene between them and their child. I've sat down with James Meeks, who's the chairman of the Senate Education Committee, to talk about how we bring school choice, not just to the city of Chicago and the abject failure of this public school system in this city, but also statewide to give low to middle income families the same choices that the more affluent and the more politically connected have with respect to the kind of education their children can access in this state. I mean, that's what policy revolution looks like. And the question that I'm posing to everybody in this room and every Republican primary in this state is a real simple one. Are you ready to turn Springfield upside down? And the answer is yes, then Dan Proft is your candidate for governor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Number 5.
Hi, my name is Andrzejewski. I started this campaign with the simple idea that it is your turn. I'm running against opponents up here on the stage that have 150 years of Illinois political experience combined. It's your turn for better candidates. It's your turn for better policy. And to that end, I'm a businessman, so I do put a metric to how the campaign's going, and it's going very well. I'm proud of the campaign over 11 months that we've put together. Pound for pound, it's the best campaign out of any of the opponents that I sit up here with today. Thousands of volunteers. Primaries are about activists, and we've cultivated those activists, putting together the coalitions of the Fitzgerald, the O'Malley, and the Oberweis 06 activists. We're first up on radio advertising, first up on television, and our website is #1 on the internet, and we're #1 on Web 2.0, reaching out to the young demographic of our party that hasn't been invited to be a part of this party. I think the New York Times had it right the other day when they said, for all the money that Andy McKenna is spending, the candidate that best fits the profile of an outsider is that Andrzejewski. I'm a businessman, taking a business from scratch to $20 million a year in sales, created a nonprofit organization that posted $1 billion of government spending on government websites. That's real Republican reform. I look forward to the continued conversation with you today as I outline the policy choices, the aggressive policy, bold policy that I'm running on.
Thank you very much. Jim, I hope you're number 6.
I am. I'm the last
Good.
up at bat here. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm glad to be a part of this debate. I announced my candidacy on November 2nd. And we've off to a very quick start. You know, we only had a short period of time to get our nominating petitions in. We had 15,000 signatures within about 3 weeks. When I announced my candidacy in Springfield, I said and I meant the reason I'm in this race is because I really care about public service. And I look at Illinois, and there's no one I don't think in this room that would disagree with this, that our state is on the verge of bankruptcy, and we suffer from systemic corruption, and we have forever. This is not so much about Republicans and Democrats, it's about character. It's about who actually has the backbone to go into Springfield and change the system. Who has the strength of character? Who has the person? Which person has really faced challenges in his life that can stand up to Mike Madigan and the Democratic leadership? Government in this state is broken, representative government. They're not representing us in Springfield. I don't know who they're representing, but believe me, it's not you and it's not your friends and neighbors. So we have to change that. People want to get our state on the right fiscal path. They want fiscal discipline, and they want ethics brought to Springfield, and they're responding to my message. We lead in every poll, every single poll. The last one, the Rasmussen poll, which came out right before Christmas, said we're leading every Republican candidate, and I'm the only Republican beating Quinn by 7 or 8 points, 2-to-1 margin among independent voters, and I'm beating him among women. We have a real chance to win, and I intend to do that. So our campaign is going very well, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In the same order, the moderator will ask the question, and we're going to throw in a little curve here, Ms. Saxon. I hope you're able to handle this. I'm going to give each respondent 2 minutes to respond. I know candidates usually can't do an extra 30 seconds, but we're going to stretch them because this, I think, is, and I'm going to ask the same questions of each of them in the same order they just responded, because I think this is the key question not only for this. If there were the Democratic candidates, it'd be the same question. Here's the question. Using specifics, how are you going to deal with the state budget crisis? Include in your answer both expenditures, money going out, and revenue, money coming in. I asked this question to each candidate, starting with Bob Schillerstrom. And Bob, you'll have 2 minutes. I mean, we've only had this problem for years. No reason why you can't solve it in 2 minutes. Nevertheless, that extra 30 seconds could be crucial. But take 2 minutes and respond to the question using specifics. How are you going to deal with the state's budget crisis, including expenditures, money going out, and revenue, money coming in? Bob, up to you.
Thank you. I will not raise taxes. We don't have a revenue problem in Illinois. We have a spending problem. Our revenues in this state have gone up $10 billion in the last 10 years. Our problem is that we've spent about $17 billion in that period of time. And what we have to do is do what you do and businesses do. It's a simple thing, not spend more than we bring in. I've been doing that as the chairman of DuPage County for the last 11 years. It is wrong to raise taxes during the most difficult economic time that we've had in the last 70 years. That would be state government taking the easy way out, failing to make tough decisions like they've been doing for years, and passing it on to you, the people of Illinois. What I will do is I will go down there and I will make the cuts. I've been making those tough decisions for the last 11 years. I know how to do it. I know how to say no, and we need somebody who's not beholden to the special interests down there who will go down and shake things up. The first thing that I will do is do it by zero-based budgeting. It's crazy, but what the state of Illinois does is they take last year's budget, they plop it down on the table, and they say, this is our starting point. No wonder we spend more money every year than we did the year before. What I'll do is I'll say to those 80-some-odd agency chiefs, tell me what your mission is. Your mission to support and to advance the people of Illinois, not some bureaucracy. And if your mission statement doesn't make the test, then we're going to get rid of your agency. Then you start at zero. You don't start at $1 million or $1 billion or whatever your budget was the last year. You start at zero, and you justify how every single dollar you're going to spend advances the mission of your agency. And if you can do that, you'll get the money. That way we will prioritize, then maybe we can engage in some long-range planning. We'll determine what's important to advance the interests of the people of Illinois instead of the special interests. I'll be able to cut billions of dollars that way, balance the budget without a tax increase, and get this state going in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Kirk, I'll repeat the question. Using specifics, how are you going to deal with the state budget crisis, include expenditures, money going out, and revenue, money coming in?
Thanks, Paul. I'm going to do it just like I did when I was Governor Edgar's chief of staff. We faced a financial crisis. We inherited a mountain of debt and a recession. And when we were done, we left $1.5 billion surplus in the state treasury, all without an income tax increase. One thing I did learn from Jim Edgar was how to say no and how to say it forcefully. Medicaid, you go right at Medicaid. Medicaid fraud is estimated to be 10% in a state like Illinois. That's $1.3 billion. Medicaid management, the Lewin study says you can save about $1 billion to $2 billion by managing Medicaid, and every day we manage Medicaid in the Edgar administration. The Civic Committee of the Commercial Club says that $700 to $800 million can be picked up in federal matching monies by moving our mentally ill population into better control in the Medicaid program. The Civic Committee also said by smarter technology and vendor management, things we did every day in the Edgar administration, $2.2 billion in savings over 5 years. State employees are given, without the option, life insurance, $50 million, pension reforms. We will have no money left for anything else unless we have pension reform, $162 billion over 30 years. We need to end legislative scholarships. We need to repeal duplicate rules, Illinois rules on the EPA that will save millions of dollars in funds that are spent by bureaucrats in Springfield. $62 million on prison overtimes. My list can go on and on. How about $2,000 for air fresheners at the Department of Employment Security? Zero-based budgeting every day, but most importantly, the Republican way, aside from managing, is to grow the economy. And I will have the single most aggressive plan called Making Illinois a Destination Economy to grow private sector jobs, reducing the cost of doing business in the state, and the best way to close your budget hole is to grow the economy.
Thank you. Bill Brady, same
Thanks, Paul.
question.
With all due respect, Senator Dillard, every year you were Governor Edgar's chief of staff, you operated in a deficit, and a gap deficit. And it's important that we have the fiscal discipline to balance our means. But when we're going to do that, we have to realize that the number one issue is how are we going to create jobs and keep jobs for Illinois families. Which is why, as a businessman who employs over 100 people and 200 people in central Illinois, I know that the key to Illinois' economy is not just cutting spending, but also bringing jobs through tax breaks. Illinois has become too of an expensive place to do business. Some candidates for this office will tell you they won't raise your taxes, but not promise not to raise your taxes. I'm the only candidate in this race who has a proven tax record of not raising your taxes. I'm the only candidate in this race who's called for $1 billion in tax cuts, eliminating the sales tax on gasoline, eliminating the estate tax penalty, and eliminating $300 million in tax and fee increases that hurt Illinois families and businesses. But when we're going to cut spending by taxes revenue by $1 billion to reinvigorate Illinois' economy, and realizing we have a $2.8 billion deficit last year, we've got to cut spending, which is why I've called for a 10% cut across the board. We spend $55 billion a year. I'm calling for $5.5 billion in spending cuts. Some say it's not easy. One of my companies is a home construction company called Brady Homes. 4 years ago, we had 34 employees. We built 200 homes. To keep our doors open, we had to cut. We had to make ends meet. Last year, we're one of the more successful home building companies in Illinois. We built 100 homes. But we did it by deconstructing our budget and reconstructing the way the state of Illinois does it. You've done it in your business, and families have done it. In addition to the $5.5 billion in cuts, we need to reform Medicaid, saving $1.5 billion by providing a managed care capitated system. $7 billion in savings to offset a $2.8 billion deficit, $1 billion in immediate tax cuts, which gives us the resources to pay down the backlog of unpaid bills that the insiders in politics have accumulated over the last 10 years. That'll give us the resources to pay down that debt. Thank you.
Dan, same question.
Bob said it and Jim said it. They said Illinois is broken. Illinois is not broken. To say something is broken means that it's not producing what it's intended to produce. The reality is that Illinois state government is fixed. In other words, the fix is in for the politicians and the politically connected. If you don't fundamentally understand that these big-ticket systems in state government are producing exactly what they are intended to produce, which is secure jobs and guaranteed pensions for patronage armies, then you never get around to prescribing the right remedies. One-time spending cuts, politicians' promises to rein in runaway state spending that we've heard for 25 years does not get the job done. If you want to fundamentally change how state government operates in Illinois, you have to reward work and investment to spur small business growth, meaning cutting structural taxes, cutting the state income and corporate income tax in half, eliminating the estate tax. You have to impose a permanent spending discipline on Springfield, not one-time cuts, statutory spending caps. Free state spending at its current level only allow for year-over-year growth equal to population growth plus inflation. That's it. And if you have a good year, thanks to Dan's tax cuts, and revenue exceeds that allowable incremental growth, any excess money is rebated to taxpayers. No rainy day funds, no slush funds, no funny accounting. Springfield is on that spending discipline year over year in perpetuity. Now, the only time that structural tax cuts and statutory spending caps work, every time they're tried, and every place they have been tried. California in the 80s, Colorado in the 90s, the Hancock Amendment in Missouri, what Mitch Daniels has done in Indiana, which is a different path to the same destination. Look at Indiana. Mitch Daniels has accomplished two fundamental things in his 5 years as governor. He slowed the rate of state spending growth, cut it in half. He reformed the state's property tax system to lower the cost structure on commercial and industrial enterprises. The result, $15 billion in new foreign direct investment in that state in just the last 2 years, and a $1 billion budget surplus. Meanwhile, back at the ranch here in Illinois, an economy circling the drain, 48th in the nation in job creation, and a $14 billion deficit. A tale of two states not terribly dissimilar, but shows markedly different policy paths.
Thank you. Adam?
You can't cut taxes with a $10 billion budget deficit. That's the bottom line. It's a nice soundbite. It's not sound policy. You'll blow the budget. Statutory spending caps, we've got a dedicated fund account called a pension, and they write a piece of legislation and they rate it. That's all Michael Madigan will do with a law on a cap. We need constitutional spending caps. Kirk Dillard likes to say the governor's not an entry-level position. Well, quite frankly, that's very dismissive of all the talent in the private sector business community here in this room today. I'm a part of that talent, and I think that we can do a better job in Springfield as governor. All the field likes to talk about and reference Mitch Daniels in Indiana. Well, Mitch Daniels came in with a budget deficit, and he cut spending, and he created a balanced budget and a small surplus, and then he got around to cutting taxes, and the first tax that he cut is the property tax. I'm running on the property tax cap, and then the cut, that's my plan. Specifically, Illinois, local and state units of government collect and spend every single year $70 billion a year, and we're a state of 13 million people. We need to put government on a diet. We can't afford it any longer. So I'll do three things as your next governor. I will cut spending, cut spending, and cut spending. And I've been endorsed by the National Taxpayers Union of Illinois as the candidate, no new taxes, and I'll hold firm to that by cutting spending, zeroing out things like the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. We ranked 48th in job growth last year and over 20 years, and their mission is to grow jobs. We don't need a jobs bureaucracy. We need jobs. We put $1 billion into that. I'll zero it out. Everything's on the table. 10% of the state income tax that goes back to local units of government. It's 2.2% of their budgets. It's a big part of our budget, $1.2 million. It's on the table. The forensic audit. A Democratic governor in Kansas did it. She saved $1 billion. We can save 3 to 5. It'll reverse the culture of corruption, and we'll be able to pay our doctors and our hospitals on time.
Thank you very much. Jim, before you go on, now is the time if you have those official question cards on your table. If you want to, but you have to sign your name. Remember one of the great City Club rules. Sandbagging is allowed as long as you sign your name. Correct, Chris? Chris Roblin, this isn't a Union League club. This is the City Club. Big difference. Big difference. Big difference. So, sorry about that. Jim, go right ahead.
Okay. Well, as I said in my opening statement,
This is 2 minutes.
okay, can I start?
Go ahead, Jimmy.
All right. As I said in my opening statement, Illinois is on the verge of bankruptcy. That's what the Civic Committee of the Commercial Club has said. We're at the tipping point. We go much further in that direction, we may not be able to come back. We have to do three things, it seems to me. Number one, cut spending. Number two, we have to reform the way we handle our pensions, Medicaid, and the delivery of health care services to retired state employees. That alone will save, in the first year, about $2.5 billion. In the long run, by reforming pensions with a two-tier system, we'll save billions and billions of dollars going forward. And then we have to stimulate the economy, create more jobs, more opportunity. We have to attract business and investment to Illinois, not scare it away, which is what we're doing. As the Civic Committee has pointed out, if our budget doesn't get under control, we are going to look toxic to businesses outside of Illinois. No one will want to come here. They'll want to stay clear of our state. So what do? Number one, coming in, I would immediately impose a hiring freeze. Number two, I would put a moratorium on new programs, no more spending. Number three, I would seek a constitutional amendment like they did in Colorado, and I proposed in 2002, that we cap spending in this state constitutionally by population growth and the rate of inflation. If we had done that, according to the Illinois Policy Institute, if we had already done that, between 2004 and 2008, Illinois would have saved $13 billion, which is more than the budget deficit, $13 billion. I'm going to appoint an efficiency panel. You know, Reagan had the Grace Commission. I want to look at the budget top to bottom. We estimate that we can save in waste, duplication, fraud between $3 and $5 billion. There's no shortage of where to cut spending. I will not raise taxes. Now, Andy McKenna, who's not here, claims in his ads that I apparently intend to raise taxes. I don't. I'm on record. I've said it all over the state of Illinois. Raising taxes would be the poison pill for Illinois, especially in the worst recession since the Great Depression. So,
Thank you, Jim, very much. Okay. How about a round of applause for the first round? You know, in politics and governing, you got to adapt. Given the fact that we have so many candidates, instead of going to each question to each of them and then another new one to another question, we have 4 or 5 really good questions. I'm going to throw a curveball. Are you ready, Joyce? They're each going to have 60 seconds because these are all really good questions, even though the first one comes from Michael Bauer. So we'll start, well, to make it a little fairer. Kirk, you're going to start first. You're going to have 60 seconds, and each of you will go 60 seconds because there's 4 or 5 really good questions, and it'd be unfair just to give one candidate one of these questions. Here's the question from Mike Bauer, member of the City Club. The governor or legislature last year voted to fund 3 capital bills through revenue from video gambling and from raising taxes on items such as alcohol, cigarettes, and candy. What revenue sources would you propose to fund capital expenditures? Kirk, 1 minute.
Thank you. I've said repeatedly that in lieu of video gambling, the state should use the double tax on gasoline. Illinois is one of only a handful of states that has a double tax, a tax on top of a tax for gasoline. The sales tax on gasoline goes to welfare and general spending. By logic, it needs to be used for infrastructure, and you need to take the double sales tax on gas and use it to fund a capital program. That's the best place and the most logical place to find money for infrastructure.
Bill.
Well, first of all, the video poker legislation, which was passed and Senator Dillard and others supported, is absolutely wrong. There's not an inelastic amount of revenue from gambling, and we got to be very careful not to expand gambling to a point where every community becomes dependent on it. I hope you will rise in opposition to it here. The real solution is to rely on the motor fuel tax. That's why I've called for the repeal of the sales tax. We need to make Illinois' motor fuel products more competitive by repealing the double tax. This will drive economic investment into Illinois and purchases, which will further stimulate the motor fuel fund. Then secondly, we need to trust fund the motor fuel tax. The politicians of the past, the insider politics, have swept money out of that for non-capital expenditures. If we would lockbox those revenues and not allow politicians to sweep them away for political, social programs and otherwise, we'd have resources we need to reinvest in our roads, our bridges, our rail, and our rivers.
Thank you. Dan?
The video poker, they projected, the proponents of video poker project that it would bring in $300 million in revenue to leverage the $30 billion capital project. $300 million. We can't find a dedicated revenue stream of $300 million in a $55 billion state budget without coming up with, without expanding gambling. It's nonsense. It's another scam, just like the lottery was 25 years ago, to give politicians another revenue stream to manipulate. I agree with Senator Brady about using motor fuel taxes. That's the appropriate way to fund infrastructure. The other thing, though, is how we do capital bills, whether it was Build Illinois under Thompson or Illinois First under George or this latest one. What Springfield does is throw a bunch of money every 10 years in the wells of both chambers and let all the legislators root around seeing how much they can grab up. That is not a responsible way to fund our core comparative advantage in the global economy. We should be doing capital programs year over year that focus on infrastructure projects that provide the biggest economic multiplier impact.
Adam.
Here in Illinois, Democrats tax and spend, increase gambling and spend, and Republicans borrow and spend. And we can't afford it any longer. I'll tell you what I'll do on that $31 billion capital bill. I'll hack it down to $5 or $6 billion. The taxes in that bill are destroying jobs at the margin in this state. I know that because I started that business from scratch with my brother. In the third year, we nearly lost our business because we ran out of money, but for another dime's worth of taxes, fees, and regulation, we'd have been out of business, and that business today employs over 200 people. We do need to bring planning and scrutiny into the capital budgets, and it's not my idea, it's Doug Whitley's idea. Back a year ago, Doug Whitley on television, at the time I was running with him for governor, he decided not to run, said that $5 billion would cure our immediate infrastructure needs. That's why I'll hack that bill down and use the taxes to pay our bills in the operating budget. We're bankrupting our service providers, those that serve the most vulnerable and the needy. It's the culture of corruption, and it's coming home to roost in Springfield. I'm running on the only rational policy on this capital bill.
Jim.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the capital bill is too large when you consider the pork, the member initiative money. You know, Blagojevich and I, when we ran in 2002, both pledged that we would eliminate this member initiative money and do it differently. Of course, he didn't honor his pledge. I think, you know, there have been some good suggestions here about going to the motor fuel tax. One of the things I've said we ought to at least look at is what they did in Indiana with the tollways. They did a long-term lease. Mitch Daniels, very respected Republican governor, good fiscal conservative, looked at it and found that they could find a way to both protect the toll users, make sure the roads are protected, and yield about $4 billion up front, and then use that money over 10 years to fund capital projects throughout the state of Indiana. I think we ought to at least look at that. You have to structure it right so you don't end up with what happened here in Chicago, the fiasco with the parking meters. You have to make sure they don't raise the tolls unfairly, that the money's used for capital improvements. But infrastructure is critically important in this state if you want to attract and keep business.
Thank you. Bob?
Video poker is a perfect example of how Springfield doesn't work. They're always looking for quick fixes. Video gambling would have been the crack cocaine of gambling. It would have expanded gambling dramatically in this state. Now, I do believe that we must have a capital bill. It creates jobs. Illinois has been a transportation center, so we must invest in our infrastructure. What I would advocate is repealing the video poker section because that is bad for the people of Illinois, and instead replacing it with slots at racetracks. That would create jobs and keep jobs in southern Illinois. It's a more stable source of income. And then we can move forward with a capital bill. A capital bill is very, very important. For starters, we need billions of dollars to build western access to O'Hare Airport. If we talk about creating jobs, we're going to have to invest in this state. Western access alone, which will cost about $2 billion, will create thousands of jobs and create new opportunities in this state, bring billions of dollars here for the next 25 years. So we're going to have to make some tough decisions, but to do that, we can't rely on video poker. We're going to have to, I believe, use slots at the racetracks.
Okay, next round we'll start with Bill Brady, and this question comes from Dave Cook from the village of Hinsdale. While the state faces significant economic problems, so do local governments. In your administration, how would you support local governments?
It's not just local governments, it's also universities and everybody else, healthcare institutions that the state of Illinois has let down. The number one thing you have to do is provide a balanced budget so local governments can know what they can rely on. I really believe that if we do that, from our educational institutions to our universities to our local governments, they can figure out how to make ends meet. But going back to what we really need to do, and that is why we have to cut the tax and fee burden on businesses in this state so we can enhance economic opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, we are the single largest net out-migration state in the nation because it's too expensive to make a business investment in Illinois. The average job brings Illinois $4,200 in revenue, which is why I've included in my plan a $2,100 tax credit incentive for any business that brings a new job to Illinois. That brings with it $4,200 of revenue. Many businesses don't make money in the first year. We give them back $2,100, we keep $2,100, and then we benefit from the job for Illinois families and $4,200 a year. We have to rebuild Illinois' economy for local governments.
Dan?
It's a great question. I've worked in local government, so I know the exigencies that local units of government face. And the biggest problem is the unfunded pension liability that is being passed on from the state to local units of government that threaten literally to bankrupt municipalities, townships, county governments around this state. In 24 months, if we do not do something to radically change the incentives presented and the obligations imposed by our 5 state pension systems, you will see in Illinois what happened in Vallejo, California, where that municipality filed for Chapter 14 protection because they could not make their pension payments. That is what's happening as we continue to impose obligations that state government does not finance and just pass it down to the local level of government, which is why your property taxes go up even when your property values go down. You're not funding any children's education. You're financing teacher pensions. You need to completely restructure the 5 state pension systems. There's about 6 things I would do, but I'm going to have to wait for another question to elucidate those.
Adam? By the way, that's the first time that word has ever been used in one of the city debates. Adam?
Every community is a little different. Right here, we're in Chicago, and Mayor Daley has $500 million of a TIF slush fund cloaked in privacy. That the aldermen can't see this $500 million TIF slush fund. As governor, I will veto any money that comes out of Springfield to the city of Chicago until Mayor Daley makes that slush fund transparent. Specific to the mandates, Michael Madigan gets half of the votes he needs every single time to force additional pension and other mandates on our local units of government because of the weakness of our Illinois Republican Party. As the de facto head of this party, as the nominee, and as your Republican governor, I will start competing in the city of Chicago, getting the Democrats on record on policies that work around the country with their votes. I'll fly Haley Barbour in here on tort reform, and for the first 2 years, it's dead on arrival, but we'll get the Democrats to vote on it, and then we'll run candidates against them, so we can start to push back and show leadership here in this state.
Thank you, Ann. Jim?
Well, local government is obviously important. We think so in Illinois because we have more of them than any state in the nation. I do think we ought to consider, eliminating some of them. Consolidation. Some of the school districts that have fewer than 1,000 students, think about that. That'll save some money. Look, I know it's unpopular to say this in some quarters. Local governments are very important to Illinois citizens. But I think we have to consider trimming how much money the state can send to local governments, because there can be no sacred cows. If you don't want a tax increase, and I don't, then we have to make some tough decisions here. And everyone has to go on a diet, including local governments.
Bob?
First thing the state has to do is quit putting mandates on local government that aren't funded. As the only person here who's run a local government for the last 11 years and run it very successfully, the state creates more problems for local governments than it solves. When you look at pensions, pensions are the great problem facing us in the 21st century. The state legislature, in their wisdom, increases the benefits to policemen and to other public service individuals, and they do a great job. But what they do is they tell us, you've got to come up with the money to do it, and it just doesn't work. The first thing we have to do is have pension reform. We have to draw the line in the sand and say in the future we're going to have a 401k type of pension, and then we have to meet our obligations in the old pensions, and then the state has to meet their obligations to local government. They haven't paid our nursing home in months, so they need to determine what they're going to do and then stand up and do what they're supposed to do, which is pay their bills on time, and we all know that the state doesn't do that.
To close out, Kirk?
Thank you. I think Harold Washington used that $1 million word Dan Proft used when he addressed the city
Possibly,
club.
yes.
We're often confused, the two.
Pension reform.
Only in certain circles. Go ahead.
Just don't make any claims in Esquire magazine about.
It's getting better, isn't it? Go ahead, Kirk.
We're waking up, Paul. Pension reform, Dave. And as the Sun-Times said, I'm the only candidate up here that has the political skills to which to do it. I'm not going to cut your local government distributive share like Jim Ryan and Andrzejewski would, because I believe that would lead to higher property taxes and murder beleaguered property tax owners, especially out in the suburbs and here in the city of Chicago. Also, when we heap mandates, as Bob Schillerstrom said on you, I'm going to veto every new unfunded mandate on school districts and on local governments. I don't like it when Washington heaps mandates on the state. We're not going to heap them on you.
Okay. You could work it into your answer. This is part of the process. Because you'll love this question. A political question from no less than Chris Roebling. All this policy can just get a little dry. The question from Chris, and it'll start off with Dan. I think I know the answer, but you got to stretch it for a minute. Here it is. Will you enthusiastically support the winner of the Republican primary to bring victory in November? Dan, you're up first.
I got to stretch it to a minute.
20
yeah.
seconds is allowable.
Yes, I will. And one of the things we have to understand going forward, whoever wins this, is that in 2002, there were 920,000 ballots cast in the Republican primary for governor. In 2006, 730,000. We lost 190,000 Republican primary voters in those 4 years, not because those folks read the Marx Engels reader and decided to embrace socialism, but because those folks looked at the two parties and they couldn't tell the difference between the two, and so they took a walk. We need a candidate who is going to bring those retired Republicans out of retirement, make them excited again about being a Republican in Illinois, and that relates back again to the policy choices that we advocate that directly impact people's quality of life in this state.
Adam?
Of course, yeah. Now, I'll work. It's a lifetime commitment for the rest of my life to put Illinois on a better path, to get Illinois right again. We're the 5th largest state in the country. I really believe, as goes Illinois, so goes the good old US of A, and we've all been treated to that over the course of the last couple years here in America. So, of course, I'll endorse the nominee. And it's very important, all of the coalitions and all of the constituencies and relationships that we've developed statewide across the state, that each one of us endorse and use those networks on behalf of the Republican nominee. Every single one of us is much better than the Chicago patronage Democrat that we'll be running against. But we'll have, if I don't win this nomination, we'll have to keep our candidate in the political vice of conservatism as we push forward our candidate to beat that Democrat.
Thank you. Jim?
The answer is yes. Of course, I'll support the nominee. I think the Republican Party, we seem to have more difficult time after a primary coming together than the Democrats. In order to win the race in November, we have to bring our base into the general election, and then we have to appeal to independents, moderates, and others. If we don't do that, we can't win. We need a Republican governor. So it's very important that we get behind the nominee. One way to ensure that there's unity after the primary is not to make this such an ugly bloodbath in the last 3 weeks of this election. I've pledged to run a positive campaign. I hope my opponents do that as well.
Bob?
The answer is yes, but I think the thing that is very, very important is that we nominate the right Republican, a Republican that can win. We have a sorry history of nominating somebody that can win. Take a look at the state. The Democrats completely control it. I believe that I am the candidate that can uniquely win. I'm a proven fiscal conservative, having run a government in a very fiscally conservative way for the last 11 years, and as a social moderate, I track better with the people of Illinois. So I think it's very important that when you cast your vote, that you cast your vote for somebody who can win in the fall. I am the best candidate to do that. As these candidates have indicated, it is imperative that we elect a Republican. Not just nominate somebody, we have to elect somebody in the fall. Otherwise, we're going to be redistricted out of existence, and we all know that one-party rule doesn't work, whether it's Republican or Democrat.
Kirk.
Thank you. All these gentlemen up here are my friends, and I don't know where Andy is. Maybe he's under the table or wherever. He wasn't at our event yesterday or our debate in Champaign either. Maybe there's a
I
road.
won't take away from your time, but those are the kind of lines that Mr. Roser is famous for. But go ahead.
But I have the microphone for once. WGN Radio said in a prognostication panel the week of New Year's that I was the only Republican that they thought could beat Pat Quinn in the fall. So I agree with Bob Schillerstrom. It's important we pick the right candidate. I'm the candidate most likely to prevail in the fall. But when I was the Republican chairman of DuPage County, I took Alan Keyes everywhere, and I introduced him, and I tried to help Alan Keyes win the United States Senate nomination, even though he was from Maryland. So yes, I will wholeheartedly, as I have throughout my life, always back the Republican candidate.
Wait a minute. Let that one sink in. By the way, that will probably be the last time that man's name will ever be mentioned in a Republican debate. Okay, Bill Brady, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Not only will I support the Republican candidate, but my wife and children have all agreed to support me in the general election as well. Kirk, I can't help it. You know, the Sun-Times endorsement, you and Alan Keyes, and your endorsement of Barack Obama, it just makes me laugh that you sit here and say that. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is an important election. Bob Schillerstrom's absolutely right. We need a candidate who can bring the Republican Party together. We are the party of ethics. We need a candidate who can distance himself by not being connected to any ethical improprieties or anybody who has been ethically wrong. We also need a candidate who not only will tell you he won't raise your taxes, but will promise he won't raise your taxes. Voters are skeptical. And I'm sorry, Jim Ryan and Kirk Dillard, but when you say you won't raise taxes but will not pledge to raise taxes, voters don't believe you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to have a governor who will cut taxes, who will pledge not to raise your taxes, and will live up to that commitment if we're going to win this election.
Okay. Starting now with Adam, we have a question here from Sharon Alter. Winning elections is different from governing. The current economically dire state of Illinois finances. Sharon, very good question. Ready for this one? Why do you want to be governor? Adam, go right ahead.
After I sold the shares of my company back in 2007, that was 3 years ago, I did business analysis on how Illinois was faring versus the 50 states. So I sat down, I compared us, and I realized that we're a high-tax state and a low-jobs state, creation state. They were third in the nation in gambling, that our kids commit the most juvenile violent crime in the country, and we're 38th in education. We were upside down on every level. I think that the Illinois political class has moved too slow for too long. Choose wisely. Nearly every single problem that we have in Illinois comes back to the patronage spending culture of both parties. I think real reform has to come from outside of this political culture. We see a great example of that in the last legislative session when Bill Brady voted for those $31 billion of capital project bills. Kirk Dillard voted for the projects and for the funding. Bill voted against the funding, and that's not leadership. That's being a politician. That's what I'm running against.
It's very hard to encourage young people to think about careers in public life when they see all of this culture of corruption, and they see one former Republican governor in prison, and now a former Democratic governor indicted, maybe on his way to prison longer than the first one. It's very difficult to encourage young people to think about public service. I believe in public service, and I don't believe it has to be this way in Illinois. And I want to be governor because I think it's time to put a prosecutor in a governor's office, someone who's spent his career putting violent criminals in prison, and prosecuting public corruption, not a governor whose first instinct is to release violent prisoners who then reoffend. I want to restore confidence in government. And a way to do that is to bring ethics to Springfield and to get our fiscal house in order, and I intend to do that.
Bob?
I'm a lifelong Illinoisan, and like many people in our state, I am embarrassed by the way that our state has fallen. I'm tired that we're the butt of late-night jokes, and I know that we can do better. As the only person here who has essentially been the governor of a small state, I know how to run a government in a fiscally conservative way. I will take that approach to Springfield. I've been a problem solver for 11 years. We've got a lot of big problems in this state. We need somebody who knows how to fix them and knows how to fix them quickly. That's why I've promised that I will only serve one term. When I get down there, I will focus on the problems. I won't worry about raising money. I won't have to deal with the vested interest, or I will deal with the vested interests down there, but I'll say no to them. I won't be beholden to them like many of the candidates that are sitting up here. I want to put Illinois back on the right track. Illinois is a great state. We have some of the greatest amenities that you can possibly have. What we have is failed leadership. We need somebody who'll go down there and shake things up, say no, do it a different way, get the state going in the right direction. I am uniquely qualified to do that.
Kirk?
Thank you. I'm a product of Illinois, Western Illinois University, DePaul University under the L-Tracks. And when I sat on the floor in May and I saw our state continue to have economic, educational, and ethical declines, I knew at age 53 with my unique skills, especially as Governor Edgar's chief of staff, having made this state live within its means before, that I had to step up. I also believe that I have the best plan to create jobs. My Destination Illinois Economy plan is the best that there is. I also think that I offer my party the best chance to win in November, and I do worry about the electability of some of these gentlemen, my friends, that I sit up here with. And then last but not least, I've got an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and you don't go to Champaign, maybe Andy doesn't, but I went to Champaign yesterday. You don't travel this great state with an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old just to go to have more of the same in Springfield. I will turn it up transformationally, ethically, educationally, and economically.
Bill?
I had an opportunity to grow up in Illinois. Bloomington, Illinois is my home. I attended Illinois Wesleyan University where I met my wife, Nancy. And we decided to raise our family in Illinois, to raise our family and build a business from scratch. Ladies and gentlemen, those opportunities aren't here today. We have 3 children, 2 adult. They both live in Chicago. But they're worried about whether or not there's going to be an economic opportunity for them to raise their family and provide a livelihood for their family. As a businessman, I know what needs to change. As a legislator with the experience to know where changes need to be made, I can get that job done. We see a neighboring state, a state that's gone from one of the worst in the nation to one of the best in terms of economic outlook. We can make Illinois that state so that our children and grandchildren not only can grow up here, but can raise their children and grandchildren. We need a business governor with a proven conservative track record to establish the policies that will make Illinois a great state once again. I'm here because I believe I'm the best shot we've got at that, and I'm the most electable in the general election.
To close out the question, Dan?
Now, my candidacy is born out of an anger and frustration, not just for what Chicago Democrats have done to destroy this state, but also for the Republican Party's failure, unwillingness to take the fight. On their side of the aisle, nothing but street fighters. On our side, the last 20 years, nothing but cake eaters. And that has not worked out very well for us. So this election is about taking the fight to the entrenched interests in this state on behalf of somebody. Because what the Republican Party hasn't done is define a constituency that it intends to serve, like the family that raised me. The folks that make between $45,000 and $90,000 in this state who get squeezed from both sides, who get fleeced by a state government they finance. This is a party that better speak for those folks in this state if we want to be a majority party in this state again. And that's the constituency that I'm running to serve. That's the value proposition for my candidacy.
Okay, we have one more question. It comes from board member Martha Janthro. You will start off with Jim Ryan. From Martha. Cutting spending seems to be the universal mantra. Is that correct, mantra? Yeah. Okay. What are your priorities in cutting spending other than going through the budget line by line. Jim, you got 60 seconds to solve that one.
Well, you know, I told you, I'd immediately impose a hiring freeze, a moratorium on new programs. We can't afford, there are a lot of good programs, we can't afford them all. We've got to set priorities. The Medicaid reform, pension reform, which is critically important, with over $80 billion in unfunded pensions, and how we deliver health care services to state retirees. All those things will save billions of dollars. Having said that, those fundamental reforms, we also have to find other ways to save money. We've outlined in a plan a number of ways that we can do that. There's not time, she's already telling me my time's up, but there are a lot of ways. Look, we looked at a spreadsheet. We developed a spreadsheet of all the possible spending cuts that have been outlined by the Civic Committee, the Civic Federation, the recommendations that were Pat Quinn's recommendations. They total almost 100 recommendations. There are plenty of ways we can cut spending if we have the will to do it. Everybody says the same thing. Question is who actually will do it.
Thank you. Bob?
Well, I'll do it because I've been doing it for 11 years. You've heard a lot of promises. You always hear a lot of promises during campaigns. I would urge you to take a look at my record. As the only person who has run a big government, now when I say big government, it's really a very small government. But what we do, our tax levy is the same as it was in 1996. Our budget this year in 2010 was the same as it was in 2003 because simply put, if we don't have the money, we don't spend it, and that's what we're going to have to do in Springfield. It's sort of different than the way that they've been doing it down there. Nobody wants to say no down there. They just spend, spend, spend. You have to have somebody who's going to go down and say, there is a different way. I know. I've been doing it. I'm the person to do that. We've got to take a look. Medicaid's a perfect example. Medicaid doesn't serve the people who are in the program. We give them lousy care, and it's the most expensive care out there. That's the Illinois way of doing things. It's wrong. It has to change. As the next governor, I will do that.
Kirk?
As I said earlier, you go to Medicaid. That's the lion's share of the money. Been there, done it before. Pension reform, and again, it's who has the political skills to be able to do that. And you've got to pick the right person to get that through what will be a Democrat-controlled General Assembly. You know, you reprioritize. You shouldn't give millionaires free rides on mass transit while Governor Quinn cuts out every penny of agriculture research when agriculture is 1 in 4 jobs in the state of Illinois. Been there before, eliminated the General Assistance Program in the Edgar administration, left $1.5 billion surplus, Bill Brady, in the bank. So there's no gap accounting problem. We paid our bills in 17 days, and we had thousands of fewer employees in the Edgar administration after our term than when we began.
Bill Brady?
Senator Dillard, that's the problem with government accounting. Go back and look at the records. While you were chief of staff, you operated in budget deficits. Chairman Brady, just so you know, I'm not willing to concede, like Senator Dillard, that the Democrats are going to control the General Assembly after the next election. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to apply the same principles that I had to apply in my business over the last 3 years. Illinois' economy and the national economy has gone over horrific times. Businesses that deconstructed and reconstructed survived. It takes someone who knows how to do that. If you don't have to have a forensic audit, Auditor General Howland provides us with the information. All you have to do is go into people who run the departments and say, if we give you 90 cents on the dollar, can you make it work? And they'll tell you yes, if you let us operate like a business and we don't have to hire your aunt, your uncle, your cousin, and your neighbor. That's what has to happen. In addition to that, we need some magnificent reforms, like giving greater access to Medicaid recipients so they don't have to rely on the emergency room, which costs us $1.5 billion a year. It can be done, but you've got to have someone with the business sense to get the job done.
Dan?
Yeah, I think Senators Dillard and Brady are a sleeper cell. And they've been asleep for the last 15 years, and now they're being activated. Now this is the perfect time where they're going to do what they haven't done for the last 15 years in Springfield and make all these wonderful policy choices, breach the gap that they had the opportunity for 15 years to breach. And we are describing an economy that is on the precipice of collapse. So, I mean, you know, who has been there? Is there any accountability for folks that have had the opportunity to lead? In terms of spending cuts, you cannot promise or guarantee outcomes, but you can guarantee an approach, right? You can outline things with some specificity. So I've outlined $4 billion in spending cuts, $400 million for high-speed rail from Chicago to St. Louis, which isn't even high-speed rail. It goes 30 miles an hour faster than Amtrak. We don't have the rail infrastructure or grade crossings for high-speed rail, and we have a freight congestion problem in Chicago. $110 million that we're spending to buy up land in Peatone for a third airport, that's not coming. $50 million that we've seen the tollway budget go up in the last 3 years, even after we spent $750 million to remove the toll booths and institute open road tollway system. So, I mean, there are all kinds of one-time spending cuts, but unless you get those spending cuts, don't do those spending cuts in such a way as to leverage medium-term system change, we're going to be on this hamster wheel of annual manufacturer budget crises until we're in bankruptcy court.
To close out the question, Adam.
I'm glad Senator Brady has put his position right squarely on the table today that he's against the forensic audit, because we do have Michael Holland, and he's a creation of the legislature, and a year and a half ago, he was Bill Holland, and excuse me, guys. This is tough policy. Let me share with you an email from Winston and Strawn. This lawyer had been following Illinois politics for 24 years. And he said, Adam, you're the first politician in 24 years that if you do on 2 executive orders by opening up the books and forensic auditing those books, you're the first guy that I've seen that can go a long way toward ending public corruption in Illinois. We have an auditor. He can't tell you how many programs there are in state government, and he's not authorized to go after him because he's a creation of Michael Madigan and the legislature. During the blow-off excess Blagojevich corruption, he audited less in 2008 than he did in 2005. We need a top-to-bottom forensic audit. It's the tough policy in this race, and I'm the only candidate that can bring this forward.
Okay. We now reach the final round, which will be the closing statement. We're back on schedule here, Ms. Saxon. There'll be 90 seconds. And I want everybody to understand that the question will be, we'll start with Jim Ryan and go in exact reverse order that we started. The question is, why am I the best Republican candidate for Illinois governor? You'll have 90 seconds to answer it, and you don't have to deal with the question that the governor before last is in prison. The former governor is going to go on trial and may go to prison, and you've already avoided that by saying, well, you wanted the job, which shows tremendous courage, by the way. So,
Well, we've set a pretty low bar.
well, yes.
Just
So
don't go to prison.
there's the old joke: you got to dig a hole to get underneath it. So, anyways, starting with Tom, it's your legacy. I'm just telling you. Yes. Okay. So the question is, why am I the best Republican candidate for Illinois governor? You have 90 seconds, starting with Jim Ryan.
Okay. Well, I'm the only candidate in this race that's actually held statewide office. I think most people would agree that of all the offices in state government on the executive side, after governor, the most substantive, complex office is that of Attorney General. The voters had enough trust to elect me twice to statewide office. If you look at the polls, and polls do matter, my friends, I lead all Republicans by double digits. And the Rasmussen poll, which came out, as I said earlier, just before Christmas, shows that I'm the only candidate to be leading a Democrat in the race for governor in the last 10 years, the only Republican. I'm beating Quinn by 7 or 8 points and beating him by double digits, and it looks like he'll be the nominee among independent voters, and they're the ones that are going to decide this election, and among women by 10 points. So when people say, you know, who's the best candidate, who's the most electable, I think pretty much it's clear what voters think as we move into 3 weeks before the election. So I'm going to work hard, stay honest, and to be the best governor I can for you.
How about a round of applause for each guy? Adam, you're up next.
I just want to tell you a story from the campaign trail. Here in Cook County, a county that hasn't grown a single job on the job count since 1990, in the state of Illinois, who hasn't grown a single job on the job count since 1997, one of my supporters has 160 employees, and he sat down with his CPA, and if he moves 35 miles away over to Valparaiso, Indiana, he'll add $750,000 to his bottom line. And with 150 years of political experience in this race, I've come to the conclusion after 11 months on the campaign trail that we need leadership. Let me build out these 2 executive orders because it is the tough policy in this race that I can do with your vote, your support, and your mandate. Every dime online in real time, that opens up the books of Springfield, the spending that Michael Madigan doesn't want you to see. And what will you find? You'll find the checks all the way down to the subcontractor level, and that got John Cass excited. The forensic audit, top to bottom. Texas saved $8 billion. Kansas saved $1 billion. What will we find? $87 million on a grant that was misspent for Chicago Public Schools. We'll find a $1.5 million for security to guard the 3rd airport at Peatone, a cornfield. We'll find the grant at McPier, $62 million. First place bid, Globetrotter Industries, Shaw. He was head of the board of trustees at U of I. Second place bid, $40 million. This is patronage versus reform, and I'm the real Republican reformer with your help and support.
Dan, you're up next.
Well, in terms of why I'm the best person for the gig, I know the system, but I'm not of the system. I've been in this arena for the last 15 years, running campaigns at every level of elective office, worked in state and local government, so I understand both levels of government, the interaction between the two, run my own small business for the last 5 years. I know the players, I know the landscape, I know how a bill becomes a law in Springfield, and it isn't Schoolhouse Rock like we were taught as kids. So I know how to advance the flag. It is very easy to wave the conservative reform flag. It is much more difficult to build the non-traditional coalitions around issues of common interest to actually advance that policy flag. The other thing, I'm the only candidate offering policy revolution, and I mean that word revolution, a complete rethinking and reordering of all of the big ticket systems in state government, not a single one of which is financially sustainable in its current form, not a single one of which serve the folks who pay the bills but receive very little back from their government in terms of benefits or services. And the last thing I'll say is I'm the only one asking this Republican Party this question. What do we win when we win? Everybody wants to talk about we need somebody that wins. We need somebody who's electable. Yeah, that's right, of course. But we also have to answer the question, what do we win when we win? Every business does that. What does winning look like? Is George Ryan, is that what victory looks like? I hope not. We need to understand that elections are means to policy ends. And that's something that this party has forgot. So we need to stop handicapping the polls of what could happen and start as a party working for what we would like to see happen. Thank you very much.
Round of applause. Bill Brady, you're up.
Thanks. Well, first of all, thank you all for the opportunity to be here and taking time out of your schedule. There's no question that Illinois faces a great deal of challenge, but I also think there's no question Illinois has the ripest opportunity of any state in this nation. I believe that my conservative business background, my track record that is consistent with the Republican Party puts me in the best position not only to be governor of this state, but to win this office. The people of Illinois are starving for someone who can represent all of Illinois. I think my track record shows that I'll fight as hard for Chicago as I will Bloomington and Cairo. The people of Illinois are looking for someone who can rise above and remove that stain of corruption. With all due respect, this election is going to be difficult, and I question whether Jim Ryan can stand up to the scrutiny of Stuart Levine, whether Kirk Dillard can stand up to the scrutiny of the MSI scandal in the Edgar administration, and whether Andy McKenna can stand up to the scandal of Polgate within the Republican Party. Ladies and gentlemen, we need a candidate who can rise above it, who can't be attacked by the Democrats by association or any other way. We also need a candidate who has a proven track record on taxes. I have a consistent record of not supporting tax increases. That is the fundamentally most important issue to the Illinois family and job creation in Illinois. Kirk Dillard says he won't but won't promise. Jim Ryan says he won't but won't promise. Andy McKenna says he wouldn't promise at the Tribune endorsement, but after he got the endorsement says now he'll promise. Ladies and gentlemen, we need someone who is consistent and the people can trust. I believe that I offer our best opportunity not only for policy, but to win this election. It's up to us to scrutinize who can best represent our party. I stand with my track record. I'm proud of it. Thank you again.
Kirk, you're up.
Thank you. There are just 3 weeks left in this critical campaign, and it is vital that voters closely evaluate every candidate to determine who has the ethical judgment, the experience, and the leadership necessary to turn this great state around. And today I want to stress ethical judgment. I mean, we already know Governor Quinn lacks judgment, And sadly, we do have candidates up here of my own party who lack ethical judgment too. I mean, Bill Brady, I haven't taken a $10,000 contribution from a contributor and given their child free tuition to the University of Illinois Medical School. And Bill, the MSI issue with Governor Edgar happened long after I was gone as his chief of staff. I'm proud to say, as the chairman of the DuPage County Republican Party, my Central never found me guilty of ethical violations. And unlike my opponent, Mr. McKenna, the ultimate insider, I certainly have never used party resources for my own personal gain. And voters need to know, as Bill pointed out, that Jim Ryan has a friend, a close associate, his largest contributor, sitting in a federal holding cell for pay-to-play schemes. With our state in crisis, we need somebody who can exercise ethical judgment and who can make Illinois work again. And I want the 700,000 people who are unemployed in Illinois today to know that Kirk Dillard is going to work for them. That's why I'm the best candidate to win the governorship. Real experience, real jobs, real reforms, and ethical judgment that you can trust. That's what I offer as a candidate for Illinois governor. Go to work, get out there, make our economy robust, and I thank you for coming out on this very, very cold day. Thanks a lot.
Very good. Last, to close out the debate, Bob Schillerstrom.
Thank you. Well, I also want to thank you all, excuse me, I'm sorry, Bob. I also want to thank you all for coming out and giving us this opportunity. Simply put, the best reason for me is that I can win in the fall. What the Republican Party needs to do is to nominate someone who can win, both for the state and for the people of Illinois, because what we have done isn't working very well. We've ceded control to the Democrats, and we all know where our state is. It is failing on almost every level. And the reason that I can win in the fall better than these other gentlemen can is I have that experience having run a government that is larger than 6 states, and it has been called a model Republican government. So I am here today to tell you and to tell the people of Illinois that there is a different way of doing it, that we can make the cuts to balance the budget, to bring Illinois back on track. And the other thing that distinguishes me from these candidates is I am a social moderate. I am a proven fiscal conservative. I would urge you to look at my record. But we have had little luck in the last 10 years nominating ultra-conservatives to win in this state. Illinois is a moderate state. If we are going to win in the fall, we have to nominate a moderate Republican. I am the only moderate Republican running in this race, and when you take my fiscal credentials and that, I am the only candidate that can win in the fall.
How about a big round of applause for all of them? Well done.